Matteo sat on the balcony, the cool breeze of the distant galaxy swirling around him as he stared out at the endless expanse of stars. His life had been as quiet as the night sky, but now it felt like a hurricane was approaching, and there was no place to run. The once warm and comforting home he shared with Celia had transformed into a cold, silent battlefield. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of love, laughter, and shared dreams had crumbled in a matter of months. And in the middle of it all stood their 4-year-old daughter, Luna, who was no longer the cheerful little girl she used to be. Matteo could still remember the first time he met Celia. She had been ambitious, driven by an unstoppable force to climb the corporate ladder. He had admired her intelligence, her fierce independence, and how she could make the impossible seem achievable. But that was before the corporate world swallowed her whole. That was before the long hours, the constant travel, the power shifts, and the coldness that had replaced her warmth. Now, Celia had risen to the top of the corporate world, working for one of the most powerful intergalactic companies in existence. The ambition that had once drawn him to her now drove a wedge between them. It wasn't just her work that consumed her. It was everything about the way she carried herself. She was no longer his wife. She was the CEO, and he, Matteo, had become nothing more than a shadow in her life. Their daughter, Luna, had started to show signs of distress. The bright, curious child who once loved space exploration now recoiled at the very thought of it. Every mention of space travel made her cry, clinging to Matteo like he was her only lifeline. It wasn't just a phase. It was something deeper, something unsettling. Celia had been away for weeks, attending a high-profile corporate retreat on the space station Cygnus X1. It was supposed to be a few days, a break to recharge after months of stress. But for Matteo, the retreat felt like the final straw. He had noticed a change in Celia long before this trip, the distance between them growing with every missed conversation. Every evening she came home late, every phone call cut short. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft but unmistakable sound of Luna's voice. He turned to see her standing in the doorway, her small figure illuminated by the dim lights of their home. Her eyes were wide, full of fear. "Daddy, is Mommy coming home soon?" Luna asked, her voice trembling. Matteo felt a pang in his heart. His baby girl, who used to be fearless, now lived in constant worry. She missed her mother, but more than that, she feared what her mother's absence meant. It was as if Luna could sense the emotional void growing between her parents. "I don't know, sweetie," Matteo said softly, kneeling down to her level. "But we're going to be okay. It's just you and me for now." Luna nodded slowly, but there was something in her eyes that Matteo couldn't ignore. It wasn't just fear, it was a deep, soul-crushing sadness. She knew, in her own way, that things weren't right. She knew her family was falling apart. The silence between them stretched on, heavy and suffocating, until Matteo's comm link buzzed, breaking the stillness. His heart skipped a beat when he saw the caller ID. It was Celia. Matteo hesitated before answering. He had no idea what to expect, but deep down, he was certain this conversation would change everything. "Hello," Matteo said, trying to mask the bitterness in his voice. Celia's voice came through, distant and cold. "Matteo, I need you to take Luna to her therapist. She's having some emotional issues. You need to fix this." Matteo blinked, stunned by the lack of warmth in her words. It was as if Luna's pain was just another task for her to delegate. But Matteo wasn't going to let her off so easily. "Celia, we need to talk. I can't keep doing this anymore. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's falling apart," Matteo said, his voice shaking with anger and frustration. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Celia spoke again, her voice laced with an emotion that Matteo couldn't quite place. "I know," she said quietly. "I'm sorry, but I can't do this right now. I have to focus on my work. You'll have to handle things without me." Her words hit him like a slap in the face. He wanted to scream, to demand she come back, to fight for their marriage, for their family. But the silence that followed was even worse. It was the same cold, empty silence that had filled their lives for months. It was the silence of a woman who had given up, a woman who was no longer invested in the life they had built together. "Goodbye, Matteo," Celia whispered, and the call ended. Matteo stood there, the comlink still in his hand, his mind racing. How had it come to this? What happened to the woman he had once loved with all his heart? How had they drifted so far apart? He glanced over at Luna, who was still standing in the doorway, her small face filled with confusion. "What's wrong, Daddy?" Luna asked softly. Matteo walked over to her and scooped her up into his arms, holding her tight. He didn't have the answers. He didn't even know where to begin. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let Celia's indifference break them. He couldn't let Luna grow up in a broken home without a fight. "Nothing, sweetheart," he said softly. "We're going to fix everything. I promise you, we'll be okay." As Matteo held Luna close, a wave of determination washed over him. The cracks in his marriage were deep, but he wasn't going to let them destroy his family. If he had to fight for his daughter's future, he would do it with everything he had. And if it meant facing the truth about Celia, about her betrayal, her emotional infidelity, and the unraveling of their relationship, then so be it. He would face it head on, because the love he had for Luna was worth fighting for. The battle for his family had just begun. The days following his conversation with Celia were like a blur to Matteo. He couldn't shake off the numbness that had settled deep in his chest. Every step he took in their home seemed like a reminder of what was lost, of the love that had once filled the halls, now replaced by the oppressive silence of a relationship in its final stages. He couldn't even remember the last time they had shared a genuine moment together. Matteo tried to focus on Luna. She was his anchor in the storm, the only piece of his life that still made sense. But even she seemed distant now, withdrawn. Luna had always been the light in his life, her laughter the soundtrack to his world. But now that laughter was replaced by long silences and fearful glances. The weight of their situation pressed down on her too. The worst part? Celia didn't seem to notice. Her career was her priority, her ambition driving her further and further away. She had promised Matteo that she would come back after her retreat, but the days turned into weeks, and the communication from her had dwindled to almost nothing. Matteo couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that something wasn't right. He tried to bury it, focusing on Luna, on keeping things as normal as possible. But deep down, he knew he couldn't keep ignoring the truth. Celia wasn't just emotionally distant. She was becoming a stranger. And strangers didn't just vanish without leaving something behind. It was one evening when Matteo found the first piece of the puzzle. Sitting at his desk, trying to make sense of Luna's therapy reports, his comlink buzzed. A notification popped up, a message from an unfamiliar sender. At first, he almost ignored it, but something made him stop. The name on the message was Mike. Matteo's heart skipped a beat. Mike was a colleague of Celia's, someone she had mentioned a few times, always in passing, always with a certain cool detachment. Matteo had never given it much thought, until now. It wasn't just a casual work message. It was something far more personal. The message read, "I miss you more than you can imagine. The way you looked at me last night, it felt like you were finally ready. We'll make this work, I promise. Can't wait for the next trip." Matteo froze. His mind raced, trying to process what he was reading. He'd suspected something for a while now, but seeing it in black and white made his blood run cold. His heart clenched, and a deep, hollow pit formed in his stomach. The betrayal, the lies, it was all too much. The man Celia had been sharing this space with wasn't just a colleague. He was something far more dangerous. Matteo could feel the anger bubbling up inside him, but he couldn't let it take over. Not yet, but he couldn't stop there. No, he had to dig deeper. He had to know everything. Matteo quickly searched through Celia's shared files, finding emails and messages that painted an even darker picture. There were trips she hadn't mentioned, weekend retreats she had forgotten to tell him about. Her relationship with Mike had crossed lines that Matteo never thought possible. He was no longer just a coworker. He was her emotional anchor, someone who had filled the void that Matteo had been unable to reach. His hands trembled as he scrolled through the messages. Some were flirtatious, others were straight up intimate. In one particularly damning email, Celia had written, I wish I didn't have to choose between you and him. But the truth is, Mike gets me. I don't have to explain myself to him. I don't feel judged. He understands. It's complicated, I know, but I can't stop myself anymore. Mateo sat back in his chair, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. The woman he had married, the woman he had trusted with everything, had betrayed him in ways he couldn't have imagined. But it wasn't just a betrayal of their marriage. It was a betrayal of their family. Luna was caught in the middle of it all. She deserved better than this. As anger mixed with a deep, bone-chilling sadness, Mateo knew he had to confront Celia. But he couldn't do it yet. Not until he had more. The evidence he had collected, photos, messages, financial records, wasn't enough. He needed something more concrete. He needed her to admit it herself. But as he sat there in the darkened room, staring at the evidence of Celia's double life, something else gnawed at him. It was the way Celia had been acting, how cold and distant she had become, how she had buried herself in her work. Was it only Mike that had driven her away? Or was there something else? Something deeper? Something Mateo hadn't yet uncovered? The phone rang. Mateo's stomach dropped. It was Celia. He hadn't expected her to call. Certainly not after everything he had just discovered. Hesitant but determined, he answered. Hello. Celia's voice came through, distant but clipped. Mateo, I need you to understand. I'm not coming home yet. I'm still tied up with work here. I can't keep pretending like everything is fine. Mateo's pulse quickened. This was it. He could feel the confrontation building, the breaking point. His voice steadied as he spoke. I'm not pretending anymore, Celia. I know about you and Mike. I've seen the messages, the emails, the lies. You're not just busy with work. You've made your choice. There was a long pause on the other end. He could hear Celia's breath catch, a shift in the atmosphere. Her cool, composed voice cracked for the first time. Mateo, please don't. No, Celia, it's over. Mateo cut her off, his voice firm. You've already made it over. You betrayed us both. I won't let you destroy Luna's life any more than you already have. The silence that followed was deafening. Mateo felt as though he were standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into the abyss. This was the moment everything changed, the moment he could no longer pretend that things could be fixed. Celia's absence, her infidelity, had shattered everything. I'll be home soon, Mateo, Celia said softly, her voice broken now. I'm sorry. But her apology fell hollow, empty. The damage had already been done. She wasn't coming back. Not the woman Mateo had loved. He ended the call, his heart heavier than ever. The truth was out. The lies were exposed. And now, Mateo had a choice. He could either let the betrayal crush him, or he could fight for his daughter and reclaim what was left of his life. Mateo stood up, his resolve hardening like steel. This wasn't just about his broken heart. It was about protecting Luna, ensuring she didn't grow up in a home torn apart by lies and deception. Celia had chosen her path. Now Mateo had to choose his. And the fight was just beginning. The days that followed Celia's call were a blur of tension and anticipation. Mateo barely slept, his mind constantly churning, replaying every detail of their marriage. The quiet arguments, the hidden glances, the little things that had once seemed insignificant. He tried to focus on Luna, but even she seemed to sense the storm that was coming. The weight of it all pressed heavily on his chest. Celia's return was imminent. Mateo knew she would come back eventually, but he had no idea what to expect. He had seen the cracks in their relationship for years, but this was an earthquake, a complete shattering of everything they had built together. Celia wasn't just distant anymore. She was a stranger, a shadow of the woman he had once trusted with everything. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that trust was gone, irreparably broken. Mateo sat in the living room late one evening, the moonlight filtering through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. Luna was asleep in her bedroom, the soft sound of her breathing the only comfort Mateo had left. He stared at the screen of his comlink. The messages, the emails, the evidence, everything was laid bare. He was done waiting, done pretending. The time had come. Just as he was about to stand up, his comlink buzzed again. It was a message from Celia, but this one was different. It wasn't just a simple check-in or a vague explanation. It was a demand. I'm coming home in the morning. We need to talk. There's something you need to understand. Please don't make this harder than it already is. Mateo's stomach twisted in knots. The words felt cold, calculated. She wasn't apologizing. She was setting the stage for her own defense. She wasn't going to admit her wrongdoings. No, this was going to be about her, about making him feel guilty for the situation they were in. He gritted his teeth, anger bubbling to the surface. But even in his fury, Mateo knew he couldn't approach this rashly. This was the moment he had been preparing for. He needed to be sharp, strategic. He couldn't let emotions cloud his judgment. The next morning, the doorbell rang, and everything inside Mateo went still. He wasn't sure what he had expected, but the reality of the moment hit harder than he anticipated. He opened the door to find Celia standing there, her expression unreadable, her professional demeanor firmly in place. She was dressed in her business suit, the same one she had worn when they first met, sleek, powerful, confident. It was the woman he had fallen in love with, and yet, seeing her now, all he felt was resentment. "Mateo," she said, her voice soft, almost apologetic. But there was something behind her eyes, something calculating. "We need to talk. It's not as simple as you think." He stepped aside, allowing her to enter, but he kept his distance. "We'll talk, but it's not going to be what you expect." Celia's eyes narrowed, but she didn't comment. She had expected him to be broken, to let her control the narrative, but Mateo wasn't the man she had left behind. He was different now, hardened, resolved. They sat in silence for a moment, both of them waiting for the other to speak. The tension in the air was palpable. Finally, Celia broke the silence. "Mateo, I'm sorry things have turned out this way," she began, her voice steady but tinged with frustration. "I never wanted this. You have to understand, this wasn't planned." "Then what was it, Celia?" Mateo's voice was low, controlled, but there was an underlying edge to it. "Because everything I've seen, everything I've found, points to a completely different story. Don't act like this is some accident." Celia flinched, but quickly recovered, crossing her arms. "You don't understand. Mike and I, we have something special. It's not just physical, it's emotional. He gets me in ways he never did. I never meant to hurt you, Mateo. I really didn't." Mateo's heart felt like it had been crushed in his chest. She was still trying to justify it, to make herself the victim. He could feel the fury building, the betrayal clawing at him, but he held it in. "No, Celia," he said, his voice sharp now. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to tell me how this is my fault. You've destroyed everything we had. You've broken our family. And I'm not going to stand here and let you turn this around on me." Celia's face hardened, the mask slipping for a moment. She was no longer the loving wife. She was just a woman protecting her own selfish desires. "You don't understand what it's like, Mateo. You've always been so stuck. I've been suffocating in this life. I needed more. And what about Luna?" Mateo shot back, his voice rising with the weight of the question. "What about our daughter? What about everything we promised her? Did you even think about her before you started sleeping with him?" The words hung in the air, heavy and accusing. Celia's eyes flickered with something, guilt, but it was quickly masked by the cold indifference that had taken over her demeanor. "I was trying to do what was best for all of us," she said, her voice trembling now. "You never understood what I was going through. I was climbing, Mateo. I had to. I needed to. I'm not just your wife. I'm not just a mother. I have a career. I have dreams." Mateo's eyes locked with hers, his gaze unflinching. "You made your choices, Celia, and now you're going to have to live with them. So here's how this is going to go. You're going to pack your things and leave, and we're going to work out the details from there." Her eyes widened, shock quickly turning to fury. "You think you could just throw me out? After everything we've been through? After everything I've done for you?" "Yes," Mateo replied, his voice calm, almost eerily so. "You made your bed. Now you get to lie in it. It's over, Celia." For a moment, Celia stood frozen, the weight of Mateo's words sinking in. She had expected a fight, an emotional breakdown, maybe even a plea for reconciliation. But Mateo wasn't begging. He was resolute, and that was something she hadn't prepared for. "I'll fight for Luna," Mateo added, his voice steely, his eyes never leaving hers. You won't take her from me. Not after what you've done. Celia's breath caught in her throat, the finality of his words hitting her harder than anything else. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. Instead, she turned, walking toward the door. As the door clicked shut behind her, Mateo stood in the empty room, his body trembling, not from fear, but from the release of everything he had held back. The battle wasn't over. But for the first time in months, Mateo felt a spark of hope. He wasn't the man Celia had left behind. He was stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever to protect his daughter and himself. This fight was far from over, and Mateo was ready for whatever came next. The following days felt like they were slipping through Mateo's fingers like sand. Celia had left, but the aftermath of her betrayal lingered in every corner of their home. The house was eerily quiet without her. Luna had barely spoken to him since their last conversation, still reeling from the changes. Mateo couldn't blame her. He was struggling too. The woman who had once been the center of his universe was now nothing more than a distant memory, and he knew deep down that the real fight was just beginning. Mateo had been busy. While the first few days after Celia left had been filled with a whirlwind of emotions, guilt, anger, and disbelief, he had focused on something far more important. He had contacted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one who specialized in family law and knew the intricacies of intergalactic divorces. Mateo wasn't going to let Celia just walk away from this with Luna as her bargaining chip. He'd already made his decision. He would fight for his daughter. He would make sure Luna was safe, protected, and above all, loved. He wasn't going to lose her, not after everything they had been through. The doorbell rang one morning, pulling Mateo from his thoughts. It wasn't a time for visitors. He looked through the peephole and froze. Mike, the young man Celia had been having an affair with. Mateo's pulse quickened, his stomach knotting in a mix of anger and confusion. What was he doing here? Opening the door, Mateo's eyes locked onto Mike's. But there was something different about the man standing before him now. Gone was the confident, cocky smirk that had always irritated him. Instead, Mike seemed hesitant, almost apologetic. But Mateo wasn't fooled. Mateo, Mike began, his voice awkward, unsure. I know this might seem strange, but I need to talk to you. Mateo raised an eyebrow, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. You've got 2 minutes. What do you want? Mike shifted uncomfortably, but then spoke, his voice low, sincere. I'm not here to make excuses. I know what happened between me and Celia was wrong. But, Mateo, I never meant to hurt you. I care about her, about both of you. This whole thing got out of hand, and I'm sorry. The words hit Mateo like a slap. It wasn't the apology he had expected, nor was it what he wanted to hear. He wasn't looking for any sympathy from Mike. What he wanted was the truth, and Mike's pitiful attempt to make amends only fueled the fire inside him. You care about her? Mateo's voice was cold, dangerous. You have the nerve to show up here, after everything, and tell me you care about her? You don't get to apologize, Mike. Not now. Not after what you did. Mike flinched, but didn't back down. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just needed to say that I'm sorry. I never wanted to come between you two. And I've already told Celia that it's over. She's not the same person anymore. She's changed. Mateo stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. I don't care about you and Celia anymore. I care about one thing, my daughter. So whatever your intentions were, I don't give a damn. Get out of my life. Get out of my family's life. Mike looked like he was about to say something, but Mateo had heard enough. He didn't need to hear more excuses, more justifications. All he needed now was to protect what was left of his world. He stepped aside, silently motioning for Mike to leave. As the door closed behind Mike, Mateo stood there for a moment, his breath heavy in his chest. He wasn't sure what had just happened. It was like a bad dream, but one he had to live, and there was no waking up from it. The entire situation, Celia's betrayal, Mike's attempt to make things right, felt like a nightmare that he couldn't escape from. But he wasn't about to back down. The reality of what had happened, of everything Celia had done, was still fresh in his mind. But there was a shift now, a change in him. He wasn't the same Mateo who had let Celia control the narrative. He was a father, a protector, and he was willing to fight for Luna with everything he had. Later that evening, as Matteo sat down at his kitchen table, paperwork spread before him, he made a vow. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. Celia might have thought she had control over everything, but she was wrong. He had something she could never take from him: his love for Luna. And that love would